This is the Fearless Experience with Brendan P. Keegan. Conversations with leaders who provide valuable, candid insights from their journeys and share their secrets to what made them successful and fearless.
Today's guest is Richard Dean, Chief Executive Officer and Team Principal, United Autosports. You'll notice we've got our team gear on here. Now, Richard is a former 24 Hours Le Mans winner, himself as a driver and also as a team principal. He co-founded United Autosports with Zak Brown, the McLaren Racing CEO, childhood friends, and today we're going to dig into on the track, off the track, and Richard's experience. Richard, welcome to the Fearless Experience.
Thank you, Brendan.
Hey, well, let's start about when you were younger. You grew up the son of a racing driver. Your dad was a racing driver. How did your father's influence in his career translate to you in motorsport?
Well, my dad didn't really make a career out of motorsport. He was a motorsport enthusiast. And I got dragged along on weekends with him. So my earliest childhood recollections are growing up at a racetrack. So he was a car dealer, a common racing driver, and quite successful. But he started very late, so probably too late to make it all the way to making a career out of it in Formula One. But he raced in some of the big races, including some of the ones that we've taken part in as a team now. So definitely there was an influence there. And very lucky that he bought me a go-kart when I was young, and that really kick-started the motorsport bug in me.
Well, let's explore that. Tell me about go-karting as a youngster. What was that like?
It was definitely better than school. It was fun. It's competitive. I'm a competitive person, so whether it was playing football or go-karting, you want to win, you want to be the best. And I think it's quite good, and I think it's quite healthy when you're young, and it sort of broadened. Certainly racing karts around the UK, doing the national championships here, broadens your friendship circle. Some of those people that I met when I was a lot younger, I'm still friends with. Some of them I'm still working with. So rather than just grow up in a very sort of small circle of friends in a small village or town, it gets you out there. So I think it's good life lessons as well.
So now, it was back in 2009, you and Zak decided to found and start United Autosports. And what was your vision? If you went back to 2007 or 2008, before you did this, and then as you did this in 2009, kind of walk our audience through, what was your thinking? What was your vision? What did you think you were trying to build?
Well, listen, on a podcast that's about leadership and business, I'd love to tell you that we had a great plan and we knew where we were going, and that the business plan that we went to the bank with got a rubber stamped of approval. It would have never passed any bank, any business board. It was very. We were both a little bit of a crossroads at what we were doing. Zak was moving his family to London. And I just finished a project that I'd sort of had enough of, that I wanted something new. I wanted to get back into team ownership. And so we just had a brainstorm. I mean, honestly, I'd love to tell you, like you say, we sat down and we planned it, and we had masses of drawings and direction over a boardroom table, but it was over a glass of red wine that we thought it would be a fun thing to do. And we started very small, and of course we're both competitive, Zak and I. So number one was we wanted to be the best, and we wanted to win and excel at what we were going to do. But we never imagined it would grow to the size of the team and the success that we've had so far.
Well, one thing you talked about that's actually a theme with a lot of entrepreneurs, so I would tell you you're in the majority, not the minority, is I think if we brought 100 entrepreneurs onto one call and said, if you all looked at your original plan and your plan 15 years later, I would be willing to bet less than 10% of people would say you can even recognize the two. So even though you may feel like, hey, those were early days and it wasn't what we thought it was going to be, and and you were having red wine. I think you'd find that's more common on the entrepreneurial journey than somebody who went to a bank with a plan, got it funded, and quite frankly executed it just the way they thought. So, one of the things we try to do on the podcast is let that entrepreneur that's right now struggling, saying, I don't know what my plan is, my vision isn't working, I don't know what the bank's going to say, is kind of let them know you're not alone. It's 2025, 15, 16 years later. You're wildly successful with United Autosports. You've won some significant races, but that's not necessarily how you drew it up then. But let's jump back a little bit. Before founding United Autosports, you were a driver yourself, and I believe, was it 2006? You won the 24 Hours of Le Mans as one of the drivers. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, to your
Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us, like, what was that like? Just walk us through what it's like to be
um,
the world's most famous race, and you won it.
yeah, I mean, to your original point there about the direction of the business, I think it's absolutely true that it's a bit like when you're at school, isn't it? And you sit in front of your school teacher and the board, and they ask you what your career is going to be, and at that point you've got no idea. And but, Zach and I were passionate about motorsport. It's all we'd really ever done, the pair of us. It's all we'd ever dreamt about. And again, I think the old adage goes that if you can find a job that you love, then you never have to work again. And while that's not necessarily true every day, it's certainly majority of the time it's true. And if you're passionate about it and you love every single day when you roll up at the office, or for me, you roll up at a racetrack, I think, we obviously do a much better job. And, the experience I've got from running a team comes from racing myself. And to your point, at some of the big races that were done, including Le Mans back in 2006. And, these are all things that at the time, they're ambitions that you think, if I ever get to race at Le Mans, I'll be happy. But then when you've raced at Le Mans, you're not happy until you've won it. And if I ever win Le Mans, that'll be it. I can retire happy. But then you think, okay, I won the category in 2006, but I didn't win the race overall. And that still sort of drives us on to achieve the next thing. So yeah, winning Le Mans as a driver was amazing. And I learned an awful lot about it, because at the time I wasn't just a driver, I was the team manager at the time. So I was wearing multiple hats. So every time when I got out of the car, where normally you'd have like a 2-hour period to go and rest and eat, it was really trying to organize staff and see guests and whatever. So it really was a lesson in every aspect of the jobs that you have to do in a big race like Le Mans.
So you could almost say, as a driver, you were a little bit of an entrepreneur. You were driving, you were managing, you were entertaining, probably helping with sponsors, and so that probably made your transition from driver and team manager to team principal and owner. Can you kind of talk to us about that transition? Because a lot of people are in a career, and they're looking to do something different. Now, it might not be a different industry. You stayed in the same industry, but very different, going from manager or driver to owner. And I think a lot of people like hearing stories of people who made that transition, the good and the bad. So could you just kind of tell us about your transition from driver, part-time team manager, to team principal, CEO, and owner? What that was like?
Um, it was a natural transition. Again, it was not something that I had mapped out in my career, but it's something I was very aware of, that your shelf life as a racing driver is limited. I'd probably push that right to the extremes. Maybe I had another few more years out of me, but I suppose the fear of having to get what my mum might say a normal job, and have to step out of motor racing, but knowing that my career as a driver was sort of coming to an end naturally. How old I was, you start to then look at what else you can do in the sport, and the most important thing for me was staying in the sport. And you know, I like to I like to be in control of what we're doing. I like to be have, the direction of where we're going. I think I know what a good job looks like, even though I may not be able to do all the different roles that are required for a success in motorsport. A successful team I might not be able to do all those jobs. That I certainly have watched people do those jobs, and I know what a good job looks like. So I felt I was in a good position to learn everything I had. I've driven for lots of different teams. And some things I liked and some things I didn't like. And when Zak and I started the team, it was always in my head to ensure that we picked out those best things of all the teams that we'd driven for in the past and tried to improve on them.
Well, let's dive into that. So, I think what I'm hearing is you started to develop like a little bit of your leadership approach, a little bit of your leadership philosophy of, hey, these are the things I liked as a driver and I would want to emulate as a team principal. And hey, here's some things that I didn't like as a driver. So those might not be some of my guiding principles, some of my values, or some of my cultural norms I want to develop in United Autosports. So what were some of those things that you liked, some of those philosophies? Like, how did you build this United Autosports where drivers want to drive for you because they know that you're a driver, Zak's a driver, and it's a place people want to be. So, what were some of those philosophies or guiding principles?
Well, as with any business, there are so many aspects of the things that contribute to the end result. I know it's a cliche, but the teamwork involved in motor racing is probably no different to any other business. But the focus on motor racing, where you see, for example, a pit stop and everything working together seamlessly, you know, the drivers get the plaudits, they stand on the podium, but without everybody in the team doing their part, it doesn't work. You do not get to stand on the podium, and that comes from everybody back in the office, the logistics, the planning, the marketing. So I could see, I suppose, when I was driving, I could see weak areas in teams, and it frustrated me. That it wasn't my responsibility, but it felt that it was maybe holding me back from winning a race as a driver, because I could see those aspects of the team where the focus is on the wrong thing, or the focus is all on one thing and not on on many other aspects. So, all I've ever done, Brendan, is motor racing. I've never been involved in any other business. I come across an awful lot of people in business through, sponsors in every walk of life, every business, and part of, as you know, United Autosports involved in a racing series that has effectively like a pro-am, an opportunity for amateur successful business guys who are passionate about racing to come and take part in a race alongside some of the greats of racing. And there's not many sports like that, but because of that, a lot of successful people come into the sport, and I get to meet them, and I'm fascinated in how they've made their own way, and I like to take some of those aspects and try to apply it for what we do in racing. And we're always looking for an advantage, and it's not always an obvious advantage that we're looking for in the car and the performance, but we're looking for something that makes us more attractive to a sponsor. How do we attract the best engineers? How do we attract the best drivers? It's a fascinating business, and there's so many aspects to it that we're not even we're frustrated as well that we still want to do a lot more. We still want to be better despite some of the success and recently that we've had.
So one of my takeaways there is not complacent, not happy with P2, or even if you get P1, you want to do it again, and you're always kind of looking for that competitive edge. Now, you're in racing, you're in motorsports, you're in endurance racing, which is different. So, ever since Netflix came out with Drive to Survive, we've seen Formula One take off, and that's a sub 2 hour race, less than 2 hours, and we'll see where a bad pit stop that takes an extra 2 seconds, or the wrong tire strategy, can mean the difference between, say, second place and 10th place. Now take that race and multiply it by 12. That's how long Le Mans is. That's how long Daytona is. Sebring, my understanding is you were just at Sebring, which was 12 hours. So inevitably, in a 12, 24-hour race, you're probably going to have a failure or two. You're going to have a bad, with that many pit stops, you're going to have a bad pit stop. You're going to have a driver, lose a wing, bump a wall. Like, how do you handle those, not failure, but how do you handle those negative moments, that bad lap, that bad pit stop, that bad whatever in the course of a 24-hour race? But keep the team focused. How do you do that?
It's a lot easier if you don't have those bad moments, and then you don't have the job of trying to keep everybody motivated and focused. And you're right. A Formula One race is a 2-hour sprint, but more and more the endurance racing has become a 12-hour sprint, or Le Mans a 24-hour sprint. And literally, again, it's a cliche, but every second counts. And you cannot afford to lose a couple of seconds at a pit stop because it drops you 2 or 3 places. So you have to practice, you have to drill, you have to, employ the best people and constantly motivate them. But, motor racing, if you employ the right people and you have the right attitude and they've got the right competitive instinct, sometimes it's quite easy to motivate these people because they are just as equally competitive as you. And when it does go wrong, which inevitably it does, and hopefully goes wrong more often for the competition than it does us, but it hurts. And if you see that in people, if you see that in your staff, when something happens and it hurts, and they leave the track pretty miserable but determined to learn from it, then you've got a winning team. Not everybody gets it right, and hopefully we get it right more often than everybody else. That's the key.
Yeah, it's I having attended some of these, endurance races, there are just moments where, it is different where it's endurance race. You've got to think of the long term. But let's switch gears a little bit. So you were a driver, you're running a team, you've got the race strategy, you got the, everything from tires to who are the drivers, what race series you're going to enter. But let's go off the track. You're also the CEO. So you're not just the team principal running the team. You're the CEO running the business, negotiating your building facilities, deciding, do we open up a US facility? Do we go into a new race series as you did as a partner with McLaren? So take me off the track and let's separate the actual racing from the business decisions. Like, that's just totally different. How do you manage all that?
And well, again, like I say, I'm probably not a good advert for the education system because I didn't go through, all the colleges and universities and come out of with degrees or whatever. I've just been straight into motor racing, so learning by experience. And business, running a racing team and racing and running a business feels very different. But again, when you win in races, the job of being a CEO, which is managing, the income and the sponsorship, sometimes gets a little bit easier because people want to be involved. Drivers want to drive for you. They want to bring their sponsorship. So, if you're successful on the track, it certainly helps the success off the track. I think the hardest thing I come across in business in motor racing, and it's a daily thing, is that pretty much everybody we employ, and we've got around 60 full-time staff, and that grows to 100, 120 people at a race where we've got additional staff and, truck drivers and marketing people, catering, etc. Almost everybody that we employ full-time is employed to make us go faster, to make us more competitive on track. And therefore, they all want to spend money, and they've all got great ideas, and they're all employed to explore advantages, loopholes in regulations, anything that's going to make us go faster. So constantly there's a knock on my door from an engineer saying, if we can have another day's testing, if we can go to the damper dyno rig, if we can have the latest simulation tools, we're going to go faster. So to say no to them when you've employed them to make the car go faster is it's not the right thing to do, but equally you have to balance the budget. So as a competitive nature, my nature is when somebody knocks on the door and tells me they've found something that can make us go faster, I want to do it. I want to have it, but you have to balance that budget. And, I suppose that's the hardest thing, controlling your competitive instinct to think that every penny you spend, every pound you spend, every dollar you spend is going to make the car go faster, and therefore it's going to make your life easier. It's just finding that balance. But again, I suppose in business you have to look at where what's going to give you the best return on your investment, and then suddenly you realize that you're probably no different to any other business trying to balance that return. Do I spend all this money in marketing? Is it going to give me the return? Do I spend it in production? Is it going to be able to churn out whatever many widgets more in a better quality? So always trying to balance the growth, the competitive side. So yeah, usually disappointing engineers when they want to disappear off of a week in a wind tunnel and spend hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's the hard bit.
So saying no, saying no to things that will make you faster, but won't make you stay in business, I guess.
Yeah, deciding which of those you're going to say yes to and which you're going to say no to.
So as you've built up your, let's call it, your business muscles, have there been any people in your life, mentors or other team owners or friends or anybody that's helped influence you as to how to make those priorities, have helped you understand what to say yes to or no, or anybody you've emulated that you've taken some lessons from or mentored under?
I think naturally you have your heroes, you have the people that you admire, you have the people in the sport or in life or business. Like I say, my dad was very much an entrepreneur. He very determined about how he went about things. I mean, he was a car salesman, so I suppose my negotiation of all the contracts he talked about, all the drivers that we've got, sponsorship probably comes a little bit from my dad. Having known Zak for 35 years, there's a lot of aspects and attributes that Zak's got that he's quite remarkable. What he's achieved at McLaren, I'd like to say is no surprise, but at some times when we were young, you grow up with somebody and you see strengths in him, and just to watch what he's achieved in the sport that he's loved is incredible. But on the flip side, it's not a surprise. He sets the pace in work ethic. He's absolutely relentless in his pursuit and of his goals, and so he's a big influence on me. Always, whenever I'm thinking, am I tiring? Am I struggling to get to the finishing post? That Zak's always going to be pushing you, and he's always going to be there. And so work ethic, I think Zak's probably right up there. And then I've got some people that work alongside me within the team that have been with me a long time, that keep my feet on the ground. And when they hear me complaining about the travel, and I've got one person in particular, Brendan, I think you've met, who is affectionately called Flower within the business. I've worked with him for nearly 40 years. He was my race engineer when I raced in Formula 3. He's 81. I don't think he'll mind me telling you this over a podcast, but he's 81 years old this year. He still works in the business. He runs all the historic side of the motorsport. He looks after all Zak's historic Formula 1 cars. He's in the excuse me, he's in the building pretty much before anybody else. But I've been working with him a long time. So when he hears me complaining that I'm tired and I don't like traveling through the airports, he usually brings me down to ground. He tells me to shut up. He's got a great phrase. He's like, well, we're not digging coal for a living, so shut up and get on with it. And it's usually a good reminder that we're in motorsport. There's some pretty difficult jobs that I should be very grateful that I'm in the sport I love. So I love working with the people that we've got. Some of them have been working with me for a long time. So yeah, those are probably as a broad aspect of people that keep me motivated, keep me grounded, and inspiring.
So from your dad, kind of on the business side, negotiating contracts, probably selling a little bit, to your business partner that you co-founded with Zach, to kind of the company's elder statesman who keeps you grounded and reminds you, yeah, it's tough, but you're doing what you love, and you're not, digging ditches, if you will. So now you did touch on something there that I wanted to chat about is motorsports is exciting. It's popular. I know I probably get, two youngsters a week on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, Brendan, I'd love to get into motorsports. Can you help me get in?" Well, let's talk about work-life balance. So how many races will you do this year?
Um, it'll be close to high 20s, maybe 30 race weekends by the time you've done testing and um, you know right around the world. Yes.
So that's one thing I chat with people about is, yes, it's exciting and it's passionate, but you got 30 races from Tokyo to Austin, Texas. And by the way, come off Le Mans and you win on Sunday as you did last year, and hopefully you defend this year. And 3 days later, you're in upstate New York at Watkins Glen and competing. And so talk to me about that work-life balance. Because I think that's the side of motorsports that isn't as, let's call it, sexy. It doesn't get talked about, but like, talk about work-life balance. It's a challenge, I would assume.
Um, yeah. Again, so you've got to be passionate about it. You got to love what you do. Sometimes it's difficult to, you know, um, go through another airport and get in the security queue and all these things that people think are, like you say, are cool and sexy. They can wear a little bit thin when you're on a flight twice a week. It's an international flight. I think one of the crazy things that's happened here, we're based, our headquarters are based in the UK, as you know, Brendan, but we have a base in North Carolina, in Charlotte. Um, but we haven't had a race in the UK since 2019, thanks to Brexit, I dare say. And so every race that we do is either in mainland Europe or in the World Championship, as you quite rightly say, from Bahrain to Sao Paulo to Tokyo, and then we do the whole North American series. So it's an international flight a week, sometimes two a week. So that's probably the downside to the job. That I think it would be an awful lot harder. I'm married. I've got a daughter. My daughter works in the business. That makes things a little bit easier. Although her mum was very disappointed that she got involved in motor racing. I think she wanted her to be a lawyer or a policewoman or something. But good for me. I get to work with her. My wife works in sport as well, so again, I'm lucky she's not sat at home waiting for me. She's sports events around the world as well, so that makes it a little bit easier. But I think I haven't tired of what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing, and I've still got an awful lot that I want to achieve. I think it's back to what I touched on earlier. When Zach and I set out, it'd be cool to go and race in the British GT Championship, but then it'd be cool to go and win a race in the British GT Championship, and it'd be cool to go and race in Europe and, win a race in Europe, then win a championship in Europe. So there's always something else that drives you on. And we've won the World Championship, we've won the European Championship, we just won Daytona, we won Le Mans, but we haven't won Le Mans outright in the hypercar class, and we haven't won the North American Championship, and those are still goals there that at some point I'm going to be happy and say, okay, that's it. But I don't feel anywhere near that yet. So my work-life balance at the moment is still uh, in a nice check and a nice balance. Yeah.
Well, I'm not convinced that when you win Le Mans and Hypercar in North America, I'm not convinced that you're then going to see you're satisfied, because if I look at your racing partner over at McLaren, Zach, I think he won the Constructors' Championship last year, and based on the first couple weeks of the season, he doesn't seem complacent with having won it once. I think your competitive nature is you're going to want to, just like you when you won Le Mans, you're going to want to go back and win it again. And for the record, your daughter who works with you runs the logistics for the team. And just for the record, I think she may have the toughest job in the entire 64 full-time employees across your organization, making sure every driver gets there correctly, every tire, wrench, person, support, catering, everything. I think that's a pretty unbelievable role, but it must be pretty rewarding seeing your daughter successful, under your tutelage and getting a chance to, travel across the globe with her. But if we wrap this up with, there are so many young people that are looking to get into motorsport. What advice would you give somebody in their 20s that if you were talking to them right now, and they're listening, like, what advice would you give to them on jumping into motorsports, how to get in, what to do, what to expect? Just any advice you'd give to an aspiring young person looking to do what you've done.
Well, you have to look, sometimes, depending what your mindset is, sometimes the people, I often look when, we're very fortunate, we sit in the pit lane with the cars around us, and opposite usually is a grandstand full of people. And quite often, a lot of those people in the grandstand would love to be on the other side of the fence. They'd love to be involved in the paddock, but they think it's not achievable. It's not in touch. It's not possible for them. And then every now and again, somebody in that grandstand will think, well, why not? And they'll try, and they'll make contact, and they'll offer their work for free to prove themselves. And when I look at the people who we employ and the successful people, and how we employ people, we of course we look at their education, we look at their the qualifications, but mainly it's about their desire, and it's about the work ethic, and it's about their ability to survive in this, where they realize it's not all like you said. You can be winning Le Mans on Sunday, and everybody thinks you've just gone on a 48-hour bender of a party where you've some rock and roll lifestyle. But no, Monday morning you're on a flight to the next race, and involved in every race is 7-8 days testing. So as long as you're prepared for that, and I think the advice is, why not? The advice is, why not you? Why don't just, if you really want to be involved in the sport, and it's not just a spectator sport for you. Everybody in that paddock, everybody the other side of the fence has tried and has found a way. And I'm probably a good example of that from where I've been brought up, and the area is not a motorsport area. I don't live near Silverstone. I don't live at Indianapolis. It's but found a way, and you need a little bit of luck as well, and you need a helping hand. But people in motorsport recognize that what they want is people who we're very much a problem-solving industry, and we want people who have got the right attitude and approach. And if you've got the right attitude and approach, you've got every chance of making it in the sport.
So I think the message that I'm taking out of there is you have to have the passion. You got to have the desire, and then you have to be persistent. It's not a one and done thing. You've got to be persistent. But to those listening out there, if you are trying to go from the grandstand to the pit wall, that you just got great advice from, a gentleman who has won Le Mans as a driver, has won Le Mans twice as a team owner, CEO, and principal. And I know I've taken about half a page of notes here, Richard, on things I'm going to incorporate in how I go about my day, my life, my leadership, from lessons that you've kind of walked us through today. So Richard Dean, CEO of United Autosports, team principal, United Autosports, former race car driver, partnered with Zak Brown from McLaren Racing. Good luck in your next race. Thanks for taking time out of your race schedule today, which I know you're going to be hitting the track shortly. Thanks for taking the time and for sharing your career, your success, your challenges, and advice for young entrepreneurs getting into the sport. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan, and good luck to anybody who wants to get involved in the sport. It's very rewarding, but don't be surprised when you've got to work on a weekend.
This has been the Fearless Experience with Brendan P. Keegan. If you want to learn to live and lead fearlessly, go to brendanpkeegan.com.